that's the silver lining, right, of this really difficult journey is once you go through this, once you put in such energy and time, really getting clear about who you are and overcoming society's homophobia, which is what we live with every day, and finding a way to thrive, you can do anything. You realize that you're strong and you can really do anything you set your mind to. And you also learn that life is short and we don't know how long we have. So let's live it in our truth.
Welcome to Graying Rainbows, the podcast community for people coming out LGBT plus later in life. I'm your host, Dr. Ginger Campbell. For more episodes of Graying Rainbows, please visit my website at grayingrainbows.com or subscribe in your favorite podcasting app. You can send me email at grayingrainbows@gmail.com or submit voice feedback at speakpipe.com/Doc Artemis. Graying Rainbows also has a Facebook community, and I'll tell you more about that later. My guest today is Andrea Hewitt. She's going to share her coming out journey and also tell us about the resources that she has created to help other women who are coming out lesbian later in life. Andrea, welcome to Graying Rainbows.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Do you mind just jumping in and sharing your story?
No, I don't mind at all. So I came out as a lesbian when I was 44. I was married at the time to my second husband. The larger story and the question I get asked a lot is, when did you know you were a lesbian? When did you know you were gay? And the true answer is I both knew my whole life and didn't know my whole life. So I can say that, my story really started when I was a young girl in Mississippi, growing up in the 70s and 80s, and having no framework at all for feelings that I had. So I did what I was sort of socialized to do, which was try to make myself fit into these categories. And the only category that was available to me was heterosexual. So I did that, and I did that for a really long time, always just feeling that something was a little off. So I did that, and I got married, and I had children. I got married in my 20s, and I had 2 kids. And I divorced my first husband for lots of reasons. But one of the things that was happening in that self-discovery process when we were getting a divorce was that I first heard of the term bisexual, and I thought at the time that that described my situation, my orientation, if you will. Because in my mind, I couldn't be a lesbian because I had had a relationship with a man and was married to him. And to me, in my mind, lesbians did not like men. So I figured I didn't qualify for that. So I thought bisexual sounded like a good term for me. And so I identified as bisexual from about my mid-30s until I came out as a lesbian in my mid-40s. It's interesting because I know a lot of folks have this realization based on an attraction to a woman, and that wasn't really my case. I did have a brief relationship with a woman in between my 2 marriages, and it was brief and it didn't last very long. It definitely confirmed that I was attracted to women, and that was a nice confirmation to have. But I ended up marrying a man, my second husband, and we were married for about 4 or 5 years before it became kind of a question that kept coming up for me again about that. And again, there were other problems with that marriage, but the issue of my sexuality was really simmering right underneath the surface. And the story that I tell is truly what happened to me was that I was in a meditation session, and the way the meditation session was structured was we had 2 sits of 20 or 30 minutes each. And so many times I would spend the first 20 or 30 minutes just sitting and collecting myself. Then we'd take a break, walk around, and then come back and sit again in silent meditation. And so the second time I sat down this day, it was in August, I remember, 2011. I kind of sat down with the intention of, there was a statue of the Buddha, and I said, okay, Buddha, what do you have for me today to think about in the second meditation session? And I heard a voice that was so clear to me. It said, well, you're gay. Now what are you going to do about it? I really looked around and thought someone was speaking to me because it was so clear that I heard this. And I was sort of in shock the rest of the time. But here I was in the middle of this meditation session. I mean, I could have gotten up and left, but I felt very much like I needed just to stay with that. And it was one of the most difficult things I've ever done because I felt like my whole body was on fire and I was scared and I didn't know what to do. But I felt that way because I knew it was true. And it was a truth that I had known for a while that I finally had allowed a space for it to come up. Within about a week of that happening, I had come out to my second husband as a lesbian. He had known that I had identified as bisexual, but we had really not talked about it much in our marriage. And within about 3 or 4 months, I guess, I had come out to my children and most of my family members that were close to me and started the process of divorcing him. Definitely within a year, we were divorced and I was out on my own living as lesbian. So that's part of my story, at least.
So what was the hardest part of that part of the journey?
Oh, you mean the coming out as a lesbian? What was the hardest
Well, the
part?
part that you've told me so far, what was the hardest bit there? Because you made it sound easy, and I know it wasn't.
Oh, no, it was not easy. It's always easy in retrospect, right?
Yeah.
When you're going back and kind of recounting it. The hardest part for me was what I like to talk about, and I didn't have a name for it then, but it was the internalized homophobia. So I was just devastated. And it was funny because I was always seen as an ally. I marched in pride parades as an ally. I thought I would be the last person to have any homophobia. But when it came to my sexuality and me and fully embracing that, I remember crying on the phone to my friend and saying, I don't know how to be gay. I can't be gay. And I was worried about, at that time, my children were older, but I remembered when I came out as bisexual and they were younger, I was just really concerned about what people would say about me as a gay mom. And could I possibly lose custody of my children living in the South? It was interesting. It was really a lot of internalized homophobia that was really difficult. Once I got over that, everything else was a little bit easier.
Did you have any particular challenges with your family?
So I was and am super lucky. I know a lot of people do experience that. My parents have both been nothing but accepting. My mom had sort of an interesting journey. When I first came out to her as bisexual 10 years earlier, she had a really big problem with it. So I kind of like to tell her that, like, I prepared her. So I got another do-over and she was much better the second time. And also I learned how to come out to her. So I came out to her in a letter and that was much better. That gave her time to process and think. She's not someone that likes to be confronted with things that are hard. She likes to kind of take them and digest them and then have a response. So I figured that out. And so that made it a lot easier. My father was really very supportive. My children were amazingly supportive. I did lose some friends, some rather close friends, but I've made other friends now. I was very lucky that way.
So returning to this internal homophobia issue, because I'm sure that's something that's important to a lot of people, do you have any advice for how to deal with that if you feel that that's going on for you?
It's weird because it's kind of like the air we breathe. It's hard to even know that that's what's going on sometimes. So I really think the best advice, well, my number one advice is always get a great therapist on your side, because having someone reflect back to you is so helpful when it comes to figuring anything out. But definitely when it comes to this, because it's so pervasive in our culture. But so I think the first step is just noticing. And that's what I tell folks is just notice when this is coming up for you. Because I think when you start to attach the name to the feeling, then you can know that it's happening, and you can't do anything about any problem that you want to fix until you know it's happening. So I think we go on autopilot a lot in our lives and make decisions that we aren't really paying attention to where those decisions and choices are coming from. So I think my biggest piece of advice is have a great therapist on your side and really pay attention to when it's coming up for you. And that's like the first step, I would guess. That's my best advice.
So I've had a pretty good mixture of guests and a few different ones that were coaches, and trying to educate listeners about the difference between therapists and coaches. Do you have any take on that?
Oh, absolutely. So to me, a therapist is someone who is trained. They go through a very rigorous training and education process to become a good therapist. They are invaluable. Coaches, there's no standardized curriculum. There's no coaching degree, I don't think. So coaches are invaluable as well, but they come from a whole different, I guess, methodology and background than therapists do. So I think it's great to have both. Also, a lot of people think of coaches as helping you through a certain thing, like a certain period, like being very specific. And therapists can obviously do that as well, but therapists have just a different background than coaches do.
I'm actually in the middle of becoming a certified coach, and so I'm really sensitive about what the boundaries are, but I'm just trying to make them clear to people that aren't. And then there's people trying to transition from one field to the other. I think they have the hardest time with those. But the simple version is a therapist is helping you deal with the past and accepting who you are. And a coach is the person who, now you're ready to move forward. Yeah. What's next?
Yeah, I think that's great. Yeah, I mean, they are so complementary, but they're very different. And again, you probably know way more about it than I do because you're getting certified to be a coach.
But there are a lot of people, like you said, you can say, I'm a coach and there's no rules. It's a Wild West.
Yeah, it is kind of the Wild West for sure.
So after you came out, you started doing stuff to help other people. Would you like to talk about that?
I came out, like I said, in 2011, 2012. By the end of 2012, I was completely out to everyone at work, everybody. That's when I met my current wife, Rachel, my only wife, Rachel. We weren't wives then, though. We were partners then. And she and I were talking because she came out a lot younger, in her 20s. And so learning about the late life experience, she kind of learned about it through me, and talking about it with her. You know, I told her how alone I felt when I came out because all of the resources seemed to be geared toward younger people. And there was nothing to talk about, like how you come out to your teenage children, or how do you come out to your older parents, or at work. You know, it was all really focused on how do you come out to your parents and college and that sort of thing. So I'm a writer by training, and I decided to write a blog about my experiences. And Rachel, my wife, really encouraged me to do that. She said, you need to tell your story because apparently there's not a lot of these stories out there. And I thought, wow, that would be a great way to help people, just to share my story and tell people that they're not alone. So my whole impetus for starting the blog was so that women coming out later in life would never feel alone like I did. And I did the blog for about a year or two. And then it kept coming up that the people who read my blog, who would reach out to me in email, were like, we would love it if we had a support group. And I'm like, I don't know how to make that happen. So I did a little digging around and tried it first with Google. They used to have Google groups. I don't think they have them anymore. And the format just wasn't conducive to talking. We would try to start a conversation, and it was like emailing back and forth, and it was hard to read, and it never got off the ground. So finally, I realized, well, like them or hate them, Facebook is where all the people are. So I was trying to think, how can we make this happen on Facebook? And I figured out that you could have a secret group on Facebook. And I thought, this is the answer, because I knew the people who wanted to talk about this, many of them were still married, and privacy was the number one concern for them. So once I figured out how to make the secret group work, I told my folks, my email list, you want to try this Facebook group and see if we can make this work? And there were about 50 women when we first started, and they jumped on board and jumped in with both feet, and we were off and running. That was in January of 2016. So it's been about 3.5 years now. And now we're almost to 1,600 members worldwide. And it's all been through word of mouth, people telling other people, or people contact me through my blog. I have my email is on the blog, and I just say, if you want to join our secret Facebook support group, send me an email and tell me a little bit about your story.
Right. And I'm just going to link to your blog on the show notes.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
Yeah, because my group is not secret, it's private. And I think there's probably some people who still need the totally secret choice.
Sure. Yep, we have that now.
Yeah. But you just recently started a brand new project. So tell us about that.
Yeah, it's called Coming Out Better. And what that stemmed from was us watching the group. And especially as it got bigger and bigger, people would talk about how they missed the sort of small, intimate community that we had when we first started, when we were 100 members or less, and people could remember everyone's name and really follow along. what their stories were, and also just about Rachel and I discussing how we could help people more specifically who really needed targeted resources in their coming out journey. So we launched this membership group. So it's a paid membership group. So people pay either a monthly or an annual fee to join. And what they get is we have our own Coming Out Better secret Facebook group where we do weekly accountability check-ins for people, and we're providing community and we're providing support. And then we're also developing resources to help them specifically in their coming out journey. So for example, recently we did a poll of the members we have, and the things they wanted help with range from they want resources for coming out to their kids, or they want help with dating. Various people need different things. So we're going to try to make that happen for them, giving them like actual tangible downloadables, things, little checklists, things that they can look at to help them make their coming out journey better.
Well, like there's not many resources even now.
No. So that's like what, 6 years later, 7 years later? Yeah.
So for me, I think this podcasting is the piece that works for me. And I'm really grateful that there's people like you and Anne-Marie taking care of other aspects of how to help people and getting these resources together. I mean, my website still doesn't have any resources on it.
Oh, no.
I keep saying, I'm going to have resources. I never get around to doing them yet.
It takes a lot of work. And so that's what we sort of figured out. And that's why we decided to hone in on this membership idea so that we could really make a difference for this subgroup. So we'll always have our free secret support group, and it's fabulous. And there's lots of resources there. But this membership group is, like I said, a lot more targeted. It is more like a coaching kind of experience. We're going to start this month doing live, kind of what they call laser coaching, where our member spotlights, we'll have a Zoom call, and we'll have everybody can listen in on the Zoom call, but we'll pick one member and really focus in on a problem that they're dealing with and helping them overcome it. And then everyone else can hear the conversation and hopefully gain knowledge from that. And then we'll have the videos saved on the membership site. So any member can go back at any time and listen to the calls to, it'll be like a library of topics.
And this is going to allow you to reach more people than your live events.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So the other thing we didn't talk about, we've been busy. We've been busy over 3 years. After the first year, we just decided, hey, let's put on a conference. And we'd never done that before. And so we put on our first conference was in the spring of 2017, a year after we started the group. And we had about 35 members come to that conference from all over the world. We had a Canadian member, an Australian member, and all over the United States came to Nashville, Tennessee, where Rachel and I live. And we did a 2-day conference where we brought in speakers and we let people share their stories. And we went out to our local lesbian bar, and it was one of the most amazing things I've ever experienced. Watching women share their stories and be heard was the most invaluable thing ever. In fact, it was funny because I'm such a planner that I had all these other things kind of planned out for us to do over the 2 days. And we started sharing the stories first. And I remember turning to Rachel at one point, because I'd given them like a time frame, like we're going to share our stories from 9 to 10. And they kept going on and wanted to share more. And I looked at Rachel and she said, Andrea, this is what they want to do. Let them do it. And so we probably did that for 2 or 3 hours, just people sharing their stories with each other and in small groups. So we really understood the value of that aspect of this journey, because many of these women either have no one else to share the story with, or they're scared to, or sometimes it's the first time they've ever told their story to someone. So it's powerful stuff. So we've done that every year since then, and had about the same amount of people. So somewhere around 30 or 40 folks coming to each of our conferences.
And of course, that's how we met, was I came to the most recent one.
You did. Yeah, it was lovely to meet you.
But with this group that you're doing now, people won't have to necessarily have the resources to travel, and they'll be able to, if they miss a live group, they can, like you said, go back to the library.
Exactly, right. And I think that's going to end up being, as we progress, that's going to be a really invaluable resource for people coming in new. And then we are planning sometime in 2020, we are talking about going out to different places around the United States and doing these conferences. There'll be like a 1-day format probably in places where we know we have a lot of these members who would be interested in coming together as a group and having sort of a mini conference.
Yeah, because there's no substitute for meeting people face to face.
I agree, 100%. I mean, you can do a lot online, and it's great, and it's a great substitute, but it's still a substitute. The in-person is just, as you know, it's very powerful.
So looking back on your journey so far, what's the biggest surprise?
My personal journey, the biggest surprise, the first thing that popped into my mind was, you may laugh, it's how boring and normal my life is now, right? Like, that's maybe the biggest surprise, because it took so much energy and effort to hide myself for so long, that to now have been out for 7 years, living with my wife, these were things I only dreamed of before. Like, I couldn't even wrap my head around what that would look like. And to now be living that life, and just to have it be a normal, boring, wonderful life, is pretty amazing. And it's just sort of like, wow, I never thought this would happen to me.
And that's a really good point, because when you're at a certain point in the journey, it doesn't look possible.
No, I remember that point. I remember crying, like I said, and thinking, I will never have this. I will never feel whole. I will never feel like myself. You know, when you live that way for 40 years, that's a long time to live with not feeling like you have a place to belong in the world, that there's something you're holding back from being your true self. And I'll say too that, you know, once I got that part right in my head, a lot of things changed for me. I changed careers. I changed everything that I thought I wanted to do with my life. I changed it, and all for the better. And I really know that I wouldn't have had the courage to do that if I hadn't been honest with myself about my identity.
As Rhodes Perry of The Out Entrepreneur, he likes to talk about the rainbow's secret superpowers.
Oh, I love it.
And, you know, once you've done the coming out journey, which has got to be one of the most scary things that most people ever do.
It is.
Then that doesn't have to, I would think, give us a whole different level of confidence.
Yeah. I mean, I think that is a superpower. And I think that's the silver lining of this really difficult journey, is once you go through this, once you put in such energy and time really getting clear about who you are and overcoming society's homophobia, which is what we live with every day, and finding a way to thrive, you can do anything. You realize that you're strong and you can really do anything you set your mind to. And you also learn that life is short and we don't know how long we have. So let's live it in our truth. You know, I really believe that.
What else would you like to share?
Like I said, it's so funny to me because it does feel so much like my life is just this kind of, my day-to-day life is very nice and boring. So to take the spotlight off me, I think what I would like to share, because I don't, you know, I'm thinking of your audience and who might be hearing this, especially since your podcast is focused on folks who might consider themselves later in life. I think what I want to share is just hope for them. If someone is truly thinking of coming out and they are in their 50s, 60s, 70s, or beyond, you know, a lot of times I'll get emails from people saying, I know it's too late for me because I'm in my 70s, and I will write back to them immediately. I said, if you're alive, it's not too late. It's not too late to live your best life, whatever that looks like. And I'm not here promising that it'll be easy, because it probably won't. There'll be some hurdles, but whatever time you have, live it in your truth. It's scary, and I'm not going to downplay that. But, you know, again, that's what we say with our Coming Out Better. We say coming out is better together, right? So find your people both online and in real life. And if you can't find any in real life, come find us online. We will love on you. We will hold you. We will wipe your tears away virtually. We will hold you up when you're feeling bad. And we will totally celebrate you when you make tiny steps in your journey. It's worth it. At one time, I thought it was the most devastating thing that ever happened to me, that I figured out I was gay. Now I feel like it is the best thing that ever happened to me. And it made me the person I am today. And I wouldn't change it for the world. I would not trade it for the world.
Well, I don't think I can top that.
That's me.
Well, thanks so much for taking time to talk with me today, Andrea. I knew from meeting you in Nashville that you would be a great guest, and you have lived up to my expectations.
Oh, Ginger. Well, I'm just so thrilled that you're doing this. I think it's so amazing that you put your time and energy into making these podcasts for people who really are searching for good information. So you're putting the good info out. So I'm super thrilled to be on your podcast.
And I think we're working on the same team.
Awesome. I love it. It's a great team. The most fun.
I would love to hear what you thought about today's interview with Andrea Hewitt. Please feel free to email me at grainrainbows@gmail.com or leave a voice feedback at speakpipe.com/Doc Artemis. You can also post to the Grain Rainbows fan page or to our private Facebook group. I'm also on Twitter as GrainR. I really enjoyed talking with Andrea, and I hope you will check out her blog, A Late in Life Lesbian Story. I will also have a link to that in the show notes at grainrainbows.com. Andrea has been at this a lot longer than I have, so I encourage you to take advantage of the resources on her website and email her if you want to join her secret Facebook group. Of course, I want you to join the Grain Rainbows private group too, but I know that some of you may need something that's totally secret. One tool Andrea mentioned was meditation. I want to point out that there are several forms of mindfulness meditation that are completely secular. Also, if you self-identify as Christian, you might find centering prayer to be equally powerful. Another lesson Andrea shared was that coming out doesn't always have to be done face to face. Sometimes a letter is a safer alternative. But it might be a good thing to go with something on paper rather than electronic, because that communicates the seriousness of your news. Andrea also mentioned the fact that internalized homophobia can be especially challenging because it's not always easy to recognize. Before I close, I want to remind you of a couple of things. First, I want to feature more listeners on Grain Rainbows, so please email me if you would like to share your story. If the idea frightens you, remember that your story could be a lifeline for someone else. I'm also happy to share anonymous emails for those of you who need extra privacy. I'm still sending out Amazon gift cards to people who post reviews in iTunes. So just send your screenshot to grainrainbows@gmail.com. And don't forget to subscribe in your favorite podcasting app. And please share the show with others. You can also support the show financially via patreon.com. You just go to patreon.com/grainrainbows. With regard to Facebook, I want to explain the difference between the fan page and the private group. The fan page is totally public, which means it's a great place to post if you want to let other people know what you think about the show. In contrast, the group is private, but not secret. That means anything you post is visible only to other group members, but your membership is visible. If you want to join the group so that you can interact with other listeners, just go to the fan page and click to the right of the Grain Rainbows logo. That uncovers a link that you will need in order to request to join. Remember that when you ask to join, you're going to be asked some questions that you need to answer or tell something about the podcast. Also, due to requests from other members of the group, we've made a lower limit of the age of 30. If you happen to be younger than that, please send me a private message so we can figure out whether the group is really a good fit for you. Finally, I want to remind you that I am training to become a certified professional coach. The key tool of coaching is asking empowering questions to help clients live more fulfilling lives. I will begin accepting a limited number of clients in November 2019. Until then, I will offer a limited number of free introductory discovery sessions. If you think you might benefit from this, you can email me at grainrainbows@gmail.com. I'll be back with another episode of Grain Rainbows in 2 weeks. Until then, I hope you'll check out my other podcasts, books, and ideas, and brain science. Thanks again for listening. I look forward to talking with you again very soon. Grain Rainbows is copyright Virginia Campbell, MD. You can copy this show to share it with others, but for any other uses or derivatives, please contact me at grainrainbows@gmail.com.